And I know one thing that Dan and I, anytime we leave for work, we always tell each other we love each other and we give each other a kiss, no matter what time it is. Now, I will say on your Bible studies, when you have to be there at like 5:45, he tries not to wake me up. So he, and then he'll call me when he's coming home. So, and then we talk. But, I think it's just those small things.
You're on your own for breakfast those mornings.
Yeah, and let me just tell you, I never wake up on time, so I'm always running around like crazy, and because he's not there to wake me up 1,500 times.
Yeah. On this week's episode of Connecting the Gap, we finish up the law of priority. As we finish up this segment on the law of romance, we'll get back into that right after this.
And I don't know if I'm just dreaming. Don't know if I feel safe.
Welcome back to Connecting the Gap podcast. I'm Daniel Moore, your host. Thank you guys for joining us this week. Once again, this week, I have my wife, Michelle, sitting in here as we are continuing our series on the 4 laws of love. We're going to be finishing up the law of priority this week as we are getting deeper into this study. And of course, we want to tell everybody that we hope you guys had a great new year. We've passed that threshold. We're in 2025. So this is our first episode of this brand new year. And we're looking forward to everything that God has planned for this podcast throughout this year. We hope you've been blessed over the last 4 years with everything that's been released with this podcast. And we're just looking forward to what God's going to have us to do here in the future. Well, if you are familiar with our show or not familiar with it, either way, you can go visit our website, connectingthegap.net. And of course, there you'll find everything about our platforms that we're on. Our YouTube and Rumble links are there. You can also visit us on social at facebook.com/CTGapOnline. And of course, as always, if you're a fan of our show and it's important to you to help share our show and get it out there where other people that need to hear it can get a hold of these episodes, then please share this and subscribe. If you don't subscribe, it's a little bit more difficult to know when those new episodes drop. But if you are subscribed, then it'll let you know every week that a new episode is released. And of course, give us a 5-star review on Apple. That helps our algorithms as well and helps this podcast to grow and get out there where it needs to be. Well, as I said, this week we're going to be continuing our study on the law of priority. And we've been talking about the law of romance. We started that last week, and we're going to attempt to finish that up today here on Connecting the Gap.
Isaiah 29:13. These people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is based merely human rules they have been taught. Think about the most romantic movie you've ever seen. 2 beautiful people portray an even more beautiful love on the silver screen, taking your heart on a romantic adventure as they play out passion right before your eyes. But behind the camera, do these 2 people really feel that love? They are actors. They are good at what they do. They can make that love story look so very real. Is love really love when given outwardly but not felt inwardly? Even though it may look to everyone around you that you are passionately in love, if that love is not genuine in your heart, then it's not love at all. If our worship is born out of true love and intimacy, it will go much farther than outward displays of affection. Our love will permeate our hearts and our lives. We will not just look like someone in love, we will be in love.
So how does your relationship look? Do you feel like that you guys are actors? Just 2 people just existing together in a household? And you just try to make it look good when it's necessary, when the friends are around or you're at church or wherever it may be. Do you feel like that's your relationship? Or are you actually working on keeping that romance alive in your relationship and making sure that that foundation of your marriage continues to be strong. Well, last week we started off talking about romance. And as we discussed last week, we brought up the fact that I know a lot of times when people think of romantic feelings and romance or whatever, that they always defer over to the sexual side of things. But in all reality, romance is just the foundational flame that actually keeps that love burning inside of you for each of the spouses, between the two of each other. It may be something like, Michelle and I will be walking at the store or going to the mall or whatever it may be. She may reach over and grab my hand, and we'll hold hands as we walk, or sometimes I do that to her. That is a sign of being romantic, trying to keep that romance alive between the two. It may be dropping some, doing a rose order or something for your spouse and just surprising them with that. Over time, Michelle and I have done that for each other. It might be writing a sweet little story or a little poem, maybe. It's just all those little romantic things, those little romantic gestures, just to make sure that you remind your spouse or your partner how special that they really are.
Yeah. And
Michelle and I, over time, now, as we've gotten deeper into our marriage, we're 20 plus years at this point. We've been together for quite a while, and we've learned by our mistakes. We've had a lot of mistakes in our marriage. You guys are right here with us on that one. You've been listening to us as we've been laying this all out in front of you. But there are things that Michelle and I have done in the past to be romantic towards each other. And we were digging through our archives, which is basically a box in the closet. But we found a few things, and I think Michelle's got a couple things that I'm going to have her share with you guys, a couple poems. So one thing that I did when I was single, I went through a really rough time after my first divorce. And the personality that I have, and this might sound kind of feminine to some of you guys out there, but believe me, it's not. It was just a way for me to express myself in a way that I felt like I could. I can actually write poetry when I really feel like sitting down and doing it. And there's a lot of poetry that I wrote during that 5-year span.
I bet nobody knew that.
Probably not. That's a surprise for all of you. Yeah. I don't have it published anywhere. It's in a book in my closet, and that's the extent of it. That's as far as it goes. But when Michelle and I started getting together, I did incorporate that into my romantic gestures towards Michelle, because I felt like that would be something special. And as she would give me cards, and she would write stuff in her cards and send it back to me.
They weren't poetry by any means.
It wasn't poetry, but it was still very special things. I mean, it did. It made me feel good inside. It put your feelings out there on a card or in a letter, because you've actually just sent me letters, on paper as well. But Michelle actually has a couple poems here that I wrote for her. And so for those of you that are still struggling, trying to figure out what in the world is romance, I just can't figure this out. This is a couple of examples. So Michelle, go ahead and share what you've got there.
Okay, so this one he put on a little plaque that I've kept with me. And actually, it's been in our bedroom, and it always has been in our bedroom since I've got it. But it's titled My Best Friend. And it says, "A friend never lets go, even when all the bad times begin. They are always there with encouragement. They stay close by you till the very end. A friend shares your pain as the tears begin to fall. They're always by your side with every beckoning call. A friend makes you feel special when everyone looks at you in disgust. They will never take advantage or ever break your trust. When you feel you can't go on and you can't make it another day, a friend will hold your hand and be by your side. They will stay. When your heart has been broken and the pain tears you apart, a friend will pick up the pieces and help you find a new start. Friends are friends forever. Secret stands the test of time. You will never again be lonely. The tallest mountain for you I'd climb. Nothing will ever compare to you. I will always love you till the end. I will hold you tight forever, and you will forever be my best friend."
So when I wrote that was actually previous to us being married.
Yes.
When I wrote that for her. And as as we've talked about, Michelle and I, our friendship went way before
Yeah.
we actually got married. We've known each other for a long time. But both of us went separate directions at one point, married someone else, and it did not work out. However, that friendship that we always had always stayed there.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't as close at times as others because we were married.
Yes.
At one
I was
point.
going to say that there was several years that we
Right.
didn't really talk
We
much.
still considered ourselves good
Yes.
friends, but we weren't really best friends necessarily. So you got to be careful with that when you're
Yeah.
married. But that friendship did stay there. And so when the time came that I ended up being single and then you ended up being single and we were looking at the possibility of maybe having that relationship between us is when I wrote that poem there to you. Because I just wanted to express to you how I felt about you being my best friend. And when you received that from a female side, how did that make you feel?
Well, it's not very often a guy writes poem. So for you to write that for me, it meant a lot. I mean, and it came from your heart.
And we're going to be talking about some spouse love languages here in a minute. It kind of gets into that just a little bit. But she has another one here that she found as well. And I think, was this one, I can't remember, was it after we were married or before?
Before.
Okay, this is also one that was before.
Mostly a lot of these are before.
Yeah.
Because I always tease him, he never writes a poem. That's what I'm teasing him about. And you'll hear this pop up off and on because everything was before. There was a few after, but for the majority of the time, it was really before. So
it kind of transitioned from poems to we got cards for each other a lot.
We were really big about. We wrote letters, a lot of letters. And actually, what was so funny is I had just had a box of letters, and I was like, you know what? I just need to get rid of those. And I went and threw them away, and I was like, here I am looking for them, and I'm like, I threw those away. What did I do?
Unless they're in a tote in the attic or something. They might be somewhere, but I don't know.
I have saved them because I go back and read them every now and then, but I threw them away. So this one is titled Dreams. I once had a dream of puzzle pieces scattered across the floor. As I looked at them intently, I recognized places I'd been before. I knelt on my knees and began to assemble them with care. As the scene unfolded before me, in every piece you were there. I started with the corner, began to work my way around. There was the day I met you, the day my true love was found. I snapped a few more pieces. A new story did appear. The day we danced in each other's arms created a memory we'll never fear. As the other corner pieced together, I saw all the times we talked as best friends and the times we made love, hoping it would never end. As the pieces fell together, a bigger picture I did see, but there still wasn't enough together to tell what it would be. I formed the bottom corner, a new story was told from above, all the times we prayed together and shared the wonders of God's love. The end.
So when it comes to that kind of thing, sharing your heart with somebody like that, that is a very important thing between relationships. And I think it's one of those things that you do seem to do it a lot at the beginning of the relationship.
Yeah.
And it does seem to fade a lot of times later on, although it shouldn't. But it might also transform because it may not be poetry your whole life until the day you die. And it may not be letters the whole time of your life to the day, but it's other things.
Right.
As you mature in your relationship and as you grow together and continue to figure each other out, then I think some of that stuff kind of transitions into other things because romance isn't something you just can put in a little bottle. I mean, to me, romance is an expansive thing that's really just limited by your imagination. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if you have the imagination to understand your spouse enough to know what's special to them, this gives you a whole wide variety of things that you could possibly do to help that relationship with your spouse and help that romance to continue to grow. And do you have another one there that you want to share?
I'm really bad about this. I wouldn't say bad. I will throw little things, whether it may be just a handwritten letter or he used to have a lunchbox. I'd put little things like that. I'd put it in his truck or I'd leave a letter on the countertop or something. But And I always call him my handsome honey. And I think you guys already know that. So
That's how I'm in your phone, actually.
yes, actually he's in my phone now. So my handsome honey, I hope you have an awesome day. I love you with all my heart. I am so proud of the man you have become. I'm glad you're my man. XO, love me.
Yeah. And if you go to my work and you stand there at my desk and you look at my keyboard tray and you look at my monitor, I've got little sticky notes that are stuck across there in the middle of all my other notes that I have, because a couple of times when I've been at work, she's been out there with me. And while I was off doing something else, she was sitting in my chair at my office at my desk there, filling up a stack of sticky note cards with all kinds of "You're awesome," "XOXO," "I love you so much," "So proud to be your wife," and all of this.
Hey, it's all good.
And she left it hidden. I didn't know she did it. And then I think it was a few days later, I was at work and I happened to grab my sticky notes out of my drawer. And as I started flipping through them, I was like, well, I better not let my boss see this. She just used up a whole pad of sticky notes. But no, I did, though. I took a lot of those, and they're stuck on different spots on my monitor and my desk, and I look at those every day. She even up on my whiteboard, there's a message up there that she wrote with erasable marker. That was 2 or 3 years ago, I think, when that happened. But it's still there. I never did erase it. I just write around it. I left it there. Stuff like that is what we're talking about when we talk about this flame of romance that you need to keep alive. And a common misconception about men and women is that women need romance and men don't. That's just a flat out lie. A lot of guys like to try to be the manly man and throw the man card and be tough, around all their friends and act like that they're all macho or whatever. But that same guy can go home, and if he truly loves his wife and truly adores her and everything, she can melt him like butter within 10 seconds. It's just one of those things that men need that as well. Yeah. We need that reaffirmation of the romance and the love. And the truth is, the husband and the wife, the man and the woman, they really both need it every day.
Yeah.
But there is a reality to the fact that they need it in different ways. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really come in the same format usually between the two sexes. The 4 major needs of men and women in marriages are completely different. And we've talked about this a little bit prior in another episode already. But as we talk about this romance that women need, there's 4 major needs that women have. And the first one is security. They need to know that her needs will be met in a faithful manner by a sacrificial and sensitive husband. That's a husband that'll do whatever he can to make sure that his wife feels secure in her relationships and in that home that they share together. A woman also needs open and honest communication. This is very scary for a lot of guys. Mm-hmm. But when you think about it, having unhindered access to her husband's thoughts and feelings through loving, patient, and regular communication with him. And again, this does not mean you're giving up your man card. You can still go to your buddy's house and play cards or pool and be all macho all you want to. But when you come back home, or if you're around your spouse and she's having some concerns, or she's having a bad day, or she's having maybe some negative thoughts about things or whatever, the husband needs to be willing to open his heart up and be totally honest with the spouse to help eliminate or alleviate any of these issues that women might have. That is the responsibility of a good, faithful husband. And so that's another thing that women need. They don't need just an excuse. They don't need the guy come home just throw excuses at them and try to beat around the bush. That does nothing for the relationship. Women also need soft, non-sexual affection. That helps them feel valued and cared for as a whole person and not just a sex object through regular and gentle affection that is non-sexual. They also need leadership. Having a husband who is the loving initiator of the well-being of the marriage and the family, but he also treats her as equal. That's very important in this. The guy you don't come in as a guy and just act like you rule the roost and what the wife says doesn't matter and she doesn't really matter in that equation. She's just there to, fulfill your every need and cook your dinner, whatever it may be.
And I think that goes back to what it says in the Bible. I mean, the man is the household, but the woman, I go back to Proverbs, the woman is wise, and I think that's very important, having a husband that's just, you can make the final decisions, but I also think it's very important as a couple that, you pray separately. And then if you feel strongly about something that your husband is, disagreeing with you about, pray separately, then come together and pray and lay it before God.
Yep.
Because there's going to be times you guys disagree, but there are times that you're always right. And there's times that I'm right. And you'll admit it and be like, okay, that's the decision we're going to go with. So,
Right.
As a wife, don't be afraid. You want to do it in a very loving manner. If you feel that God's telling you something different, you want to do that in a loving manner to come across that.
Well, when we talk about this leadership thing, with the husband being the head of the home, the spiritual head, as you were saying, but yet you being an equal, how important is it that I trust you as an equal in our relationship? And what does it do for your value and your worth and the actual marriage that we have together, knowing that I treat you as an equal? How do you feel like that helps your value?
Well,
or as a woman, as a general?
Well, and I think, that comes back. I've been in a marriage where I didn't have that, and I felt like I had no self-worth. I had my opinion, my thoughts, nothing I felt like even mattered. So it made me think at times, is this what God told me? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? But now that I'm in a marriage that you treat me that way, it's a lot different. It encourages me that, hey, God is speaking to me, and I know that that's the case. And I'm going to tell you with that open communication what I feel like. And so at that point, I feel like my word matters and that my self-worth is so much more. And I have more self-confidence in our relationship because we have that open communication and I can discuss things with you and,
Yeah. So if a woman is in a relationship right now and she's not getting this type of leadership structure in her home and she feels like she's worthless, she feels like she's just there just like a maid, she doesn't really feel like there's that much of a connection between her and her husband. What encouragement from woman to woman, and you being in that kind of a situation like that, similar to that before, what encouragement could you give to a woman that's in that situation right now?
First and foremost, you are loved. You are loved more than you'll ever know. God loves you, and you are worth more than anything. As I always say, he left the 99 for the one. That's you. You think about, I'm not worthy. You are worthy. I would tell anybody to really soak yourself in the Bible. Let God be your husband. Let him be of all things to you. And, talk to a minister, a woman, I would say, talk about that in a meeting with them and tell them how you feel. But I would also talk to your husband to open his heart. Yeah. It's not always that way, but there was a lot of times that I asked God to change me. Like, I didn't understand what was wrong. I thought it was all me. So I kept asking God to change me and change my thoughts and how I perceived things and how I thought of things. But in reality, it wasn't me, you know? And so it was the situation that I was in. And so I began praying that God open his heart and that God would, show him how he's treating me, although that probably wasn't the right way. But I would definitely seek out, going to speak to a minister and, confide in them, because you can't just keep it all inside.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I kept a lot inside and I felt like I just died daily.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult and it's very dark. And you don't realize that.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very important to soak yourself in the Bible because you are chosen and you are loved.
Yeah. And definitely marriage counseling should be in the equation.
Yeah.
If it gets to that point.
Possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If both spouses can agree to do it, that's probably a good example of when it needs to happen.
And I think that was very good suggestions because I did suggest that and it didn't work out. It was never, I don't have the problem, and it, I even hate to give advice on that just simply because, every marriage is so different. Every person has different personalities. So how they see things, how they perceive things and take things is so different. So what I say worked for me and may not work for anybody else.
Right.
So that's one thing I kind of hesitant on how to say, because that was just my situation with that person.
Well, the key to it is to for sure work on yourself. Make sure that you keep in the understanding between you and God that you are valuable, regardless of what you're being told from the outside. God really defines you. God really says who you are. And you need to stay on the same page with God at that point. Pray about your relationship. Pray about your spouse's heart.
Yeah.
And ask God to work in that situation. And he hears your prayers and he will answer that. And then if the spouse, if God does get that spouse to a point where they do feel some conviction in their heart to open their heart, maybe then they would be more willing and open to listening to what's going on in the relationship from your standpoint of it, or maybe going to marriage counseling or whatever it may be. But we do know there's cases too where it just doesn't end up working at all because the other person's so stubborn in their ways, or they just don't care about the marriage.
Right. And I think you can go back into when we start talking, I always look back at old pictures and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I was so broken in so many ways that I didn't even realize it. I had let myself just be this, and there's nothing wrong with being a plainly lonely girl, but I look back and I could tell that I wasn't happy on the outside or the inside.
Had no pride in yourself.
No.
Yeah.
No, not at all. And it's surprising that I let myself go like that.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it.
And we do have an episode coming up later on domineering partners, dominant relationships, and that kind of thing. We'll get a little deeper into that, but this does have a little bit to go with the romance side of things, though. The leadership thing's going to have to balance in the home if the romance is going to work.
And it can't be a female in a marriage dominating the whole marriage.
It goes both ways.
Yes.
So with men, they have 4 major needs as well. Number 1 is honor and respect. We like being talked to and treated with dignity and as though we are believed and valued. And of course, men love sex, having their sexual needs met on a regular and energetic manner. That's very important to the guy. Friendship with his wife. Guys, they relish having their wife as their best friend and doing enjoyable things with them on a regular basis. And Michelle and I can vouch for that. We hardly ever do anything separate. We just enjoy being in each other's company and doing everything together. And then domestic support. Guys like to have a wife who is domestically centered and focuses on the needs of the home. That's just some of the major needs of a man. So as you can tell between the two genders, the husband and the wife, those are very different from each other. So there's a lot to navigate there when you're trying to keep these things together romantically and keeping that flame burning within your relationship. But to achieve successful romance, it should be mutually beneficial. An ideal marriage, both partners should have their needs fulfilled. Regardless of what your love language is and regardless of what my love language is, we both should understand how to make sure that it works.
Absolutely.
And make sure that it's taken care of. This requires each spouse to provide what the other one lacks. In other words, both spouses must meet needs in each other that they don't have themselves. Women are emotional, men are sexual. Unfortunately, this is often where the relationships falter. The husbands and wives just don't understand each other sometimes, and they can't mesh and bring that together where they can actually meet each other's needs. Many married couples struggle to acknowledge their partner's needs as valid while prioritizing their own needs as normal and significant. When faced with different needs, they often criticize, they often judge, they often reject them in an attempt to mold them to their own requirements. The wife may be saying to the husband, no, this is how I want you to be, and you're going to be like this. I'm going to make sure of it. Or it might be the husband telling the wife the same thing. No, this is what I expect. This is who you are and who you're going to be, whether if you like it or not. This is the way I see it.
Or we secretly try to change you.
Yeah. Do the grooming thing over 20 years till it gets to that point. But when you think about this, there's an old saying that kind of goes along with this type of a relationship. It goes like this. It says, in a marriage, we should become one, But the question is, which one? Should we become the husband or do we become the wife? And well, the solution to this question is that in marriage, becoming one is achieved by embracing and respecting each other's differences.
Yes.
While diligently, faithfully, and aggressively meeting each other's needs.
Yes.
Romance blossoms when we comprehend and embrace our partner's needs, then strive to fulfill them in their love language, not ours.
Yes.
So I need to try to fulfill yours and what your needs are. You know what my love language is. You know you have to fulfill my needs according to what mine are. It's not that we're both exactly identical.
Right.
So there's a couple examples here that we can kind of share to show a little bit more light on exactly what this looks like.
And this is out of the book.
Yes. In example 1, George was a very handsome man and a star athlete in college. His wife, Tammy, was a beautiful blonde with a petite and shapely body. George and Tammy had a passionate but short dating experience, followed by an elaborate and well-attended wedding. After they were married, they had a great sex life. They were both attracted to each other and enjoyed having sex on a regular basis. But there was something missing. George never touched Tammy outside of the bedroom, even though she lovingly explained to him many times how much she really wanted that. In one instance, Tammy reached over in the car as George was driving and took his hand. He immediately pulled it away without saying a word. In hurt and frustration, Tammy asked, "George, why can't you just hold my hand?" While looking straight ahead and without any emotion, he responded, "Because I don't do that, and I never will. This is how I am, and you can take it or you can leave it." George valued sex because it was his need. He completely rejected non-sexual affection because it wasn't his need. That type of selfish insensitivity caused his marriage to almost fail after several years. But thanks to Tammy reaching out to their pastor and his guidance, George changed, and their marriage was saved. In example 2, James and Claudia dated for 5 years through college, and most of it was long distance. Both of them were in medical school at different universities and in different cities. They were committed to each other and talked regularly. It was the prominent feature of their relationship and something that they both enjoyed. As often as they could, they traveled to see each other. When they were together, they were very expressive physically without going all the way. They were both committed to waiting until marriage to have intercourse. After 5 years of dating, they got married the month after they both finished their residencies. In their first year of marriage, their sex life was good, but not great. James had much more of a sex drive than Claudia. As time went by, she objected more and more to his advances, and she was also increasingly passive during sex. On one occasion, when James wanted sex, Claudia lay down on the bed naked and said, "Okay, just get it over with." In response, James walked away and spent the rest of the evening watching television in the living room. On another occasion, when James was making sexual advances toward Claudia, she accusingly said to him, "What is wrong with you? Why can't you get enough sex? Are you watching porn or something?" Well, those words were the beginning of the end of James and Claudia's marriage. 2 years later, James moved out of his and Claudia's house and moved in with a woman he had met online and had been having an affair with for over a year. Even though Claudia's attitudes towards sex didn't in any way justify James' adultery, it created an unmet need in him that another woman was more than willing to meet. Romance occurs when two people go outside of themselves to meet a need or desire in their spouses they themselves either don't have or don't have to the same degree. Romance to a woman looks much different than it does to a man, but we both need it equally. Romance to a woman is emotionally connected, conversational, mostly non-sexual, and male-initiated. Romance to a man is honoring, sexual, fun, and comfortable. Romance occurs as both spouses become emotionally bilingual. A romantic husband knows how to speak love in his wife's language, and a romantic wife knows how to speak love in her husband's language. When both spouses are speaking love in each other's language, a dynamic occurs that propels them to the mountaintop of marriage and keeps them there. Mm-hmm. The rarefied air they breathe is enjoyed only by the selfless few couples who speak love daily in each other's language.
That's good.
I knew it was going to take a little time to read those, but I thought it was so important to put those two examples in there because it vividly gives a picture of what happens if you're not on the same page.
Yeah.
And
I think there's going to be times that you're not on the same page, but you can't be that way all the way, all the time.
right.
You just can't.
And and it needs to be kept to a minimum,
Yes.
obviously, because I know there's times in marriage that it is exhausting. You get tired and, just stuff happens or whatever. But you need to keep that to a minimal. And if there are issues there that are starting to create these problems, they probably need discussed. That's when that communication really needs to start opening up, because you don't want it to get to where Claudia and George were at.
No, and I think, and I think there is a part of the book where we start talking more about the sexual part.
Yes.
But I think, there's going to be times where you go through seasons of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't jump in too much of that because I know it's coming.
Right.
But there is times where there's going to be seasons of, I think, men have different seasons, women have different seasons in that sexual part.
Right. Yeah, but, for the romance side of things, that's something you definitely need to navigate. Don't just ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that you have to make sure that you take care of.
Yeah.
So as we continue, the next thing for romance that we come up to here is communicating unique value to your spouse. So we talked a little bit about this as we first started our discussion today. Imagine for a moment a wife getting a beautiful and meaningful card from her husband and a big bouquet of roses. Needless to say, she would be ecstatic and appreciative. But what if she found out that same day that her husband also sent that same thing to her mother-in-law, her sister-in-law, and her husband's female assistant?
I'd be so mad.
That's not a good thing. I think you might get some burnt offerings that night when you got home for dinner.
Definitely not something to do.
Yeah. So let's flip the script on this now. Think about a husband whose loving wife calls him by his pet name, Tiger. Well, for all of their married life, that was her private name reserved only for him, and that made him feel important and loved. But what if he was at a business function with his wife and overheard her meet a male friend named Bill, also calling him Tiger, accompanied by an affectionate smile?
How awkward would that be?
That is not good.
Nope.
Definitely not something that
And I just
you
want
want
everybody
to
to
be
know that's not Daniel's pet name, and we don't have a pet name. So just FYI.
I kind of like Tiger.
No, let's not even go down that road.
We're not going to start up on that one.
No pet names. No.
But as we think about these two examples, the romance is a deeply personal and intimate expression of love that is dedicated to one specific person. While acts of kindness and consideration towards others are certainly important, you've got friendships and you've got other people in your life. We know that. But true romance is characterized by a unique connection and admiration for the person we love. In romantic love, we convey to our partner that they hold a special and cherished place in our hearts. This is evident through the use of pet names or reserved solely for them by going out of our way to perform thoughtful gestures and actions that we reserve exclusively for that person, thus demonstrating the depth of our affection and care. So what we do for friends or people that we know, what we do for our spouses really needs to be a more special type of thing on a deeper level.
Absolutely.
And you don't want to take those deeper level things that you share between you and your spouse and make that a common thing that you do with your friends, because then it takes the meaningfulness out of it.
Absolutely, it does.
Between the spouses when that happens.
It makes you feel no different.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes you not feel that special anymore. Nope. So romance serves as a vital and distinctive form of communication within a marriage, allowing us to distinguish and give precedent to our relationship above all others. And without the presence of romance, the connection with our spouse can often feel indistinguishable from our interactions with other individuals that we encounter, with the exception of sex. So if you're not careful, it can get to a point where really the only thing different in your relationship is your sexual times that you have between each other. Everything else is just an open book for anybody and everybody around you. Romance plays a crucial role in reinforcing the unique bond and special connection that exists between spouses, setting the marriage apart and fostering a sense of exclusivity and prioritization that strengthens the marital relationship. Got to remember that women feel loved and appreciated when their husbands consistently express admiration and demonstrate thoughtfulness through unique and thoughtful words and actions. This can be shown through loving gestures, creative displays of affection, thoughtful gifts, planning special experiences, and offering support around the house with the children. Men feel cherished and valued when their wives consistently show unwavering devotion and appreciation through actions and words that cater to their needs and wishes. It is crucial for a husband to feel secure in knowing that his wife's attention and energy are dedicated solely to him and that she hasn't been stolen from him by outside distractions. Romance is the way in which she conveys his irreplaceable importance and position as her top priority in her life. So as we discuss this point here today, we encourage you to think about this area in your marriage. What are the things you do and say on a consistent basis that communicates and shows unique value to your spouse? Maybe you need to make a list of them and see where you're at. And maybe then if that list is awfully short, maybe you need to expand that list a little bit and to show a little bit more romantic expressions towards each other.
Yeah.
That's probably a good way to know how well you're doing at it, is by making a list of what you really do right now. One thing that I always do for my wife, every time we, eat a meal, I always tell her, say, good dinner, hun. I tell her that almost, even if we go to McDonald's, I'll say, good dinner, hun.
And he does. And it makes me laugh because I'm like, I didn't make that, but whatever.
Yeah. But I do appreciate it. And I want to make sure that, because when you do cook the meal, I'm very sincere about that. And as we've talked about before too, I usually do breakfast. I
was going to say, I always
98% of the time. And you always tell me, thank you for making breakfast this morning, That may seem something simple, but it's very important. Even those little things like that mean so much.
It does.
Because it really shows that you're valued, when that time comes.
And I know one thing that Dan and I, anytime we leave for work, we always tell each other we love each other, and we give each other a kiss, no matter what time it is. Now, I will say on your Bible studies, when you have to be there at like 5:45, he tries not to wake me up. So he, and then he'll call me when he's coming home. So, and then we talk. But, I think it's just those small things.
You're on your own for breakfast those mornings.
Yeah. And let me just tell you, I never wake up on time. So I'm always running around like crazy. And because he's not there to wake me up 1,500 times.
Yeah. So as you think about this point here about just different ways that you can show affection, whether if it's through, writing just a simple card or a little letter or a poem, or we've shared several different things in today's episode.
Yeah. And there's another thing that we did. We made little coupon books.
Yes, we did.
When I made his, I would do like a free wash on your truck, or free clean out on your truck, or like free lunch, or something that just literally, just the small things that you can do financially without spending money, because there was a time where we were really short with our money. And so therefore you just try to do those things that are really meaningful.
Yeah.
To show them that you love and care for them. Yeah,
that's just another example of something that you can do that's a little neat, a little different, but it's a good reminder that you have there that each of you are special, and there's things that you can do for each other to show that. As we wrap up today, we're going to talk about empathy here real quick. Empathy involves comprehending and sharing the emotions of another person. It requires us to empathize by imagining ourselves in their position and considering their feelings.
So good.
During the dating phase, we naturally exhibit high levels of empathy. We frequently place ourselves in the shoes of the person we are dating, contemplating how our words and actions make them feel, because the last thing we want to do is say something to infuriate your boyfriend or girlfriend, and they say, okay, I'm done. We're breaking up and I'm moving on. So you're super careful with that when you're dating. The presence of empathy cultivates a setting of thoughtful and attentive care that nurtures awesome romantic love. Feeling secure in an environment where our emotions and welfare are appreciated is very crucial. Conversely, when we sense that our thoughts and feelings are disregarded, we experience a sense of vulnerability and unease. So when Michelle and I started dating, obviously my focus at that time was to win her over. I was very attracted to her and really enjoyed all the times that we were together. When I picked her up on a date, there were times I would open the door for her. I might even help her get into the car. When I drove, I was more careful about being safe so that she would feel protected while riding with me. Well, fast forward 5 years later.
I don't think that ever happened.
You don't think it did?
Driving safe?
Yeah, I think I drove safer
I
when
don't
we were
know that
dating.
you ever drove the speed limit.
Well, that's not being unsafe. I mean, I tried to stay out of the ditches and taking
Well,
shortcuts
I guess
through the
if you
field.
say that, then yes. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
But yeah, so fast forward 5 years. Once we were married and I was secure in our marriage, and she was trapped and had nowhere else to go, my careful driving was out the door. Sometimes she would see my road rage and the importance it was for me to stay in the front of the line of cars at all costs.
There it is.
She would complain and get on to me sometimes about my driving, but half the time I wouldn't listen and I wouldn't slow down. So the same empathy that I exercised when I barely knew her at that point was out the window. Now that we were married, I never put myself into her shoes and considered how important it was for me to listen to her and the things that she cared about. That uncaring attitude escalated in our marriage to where it became a factor in our marriage eventually and became one of the reasons that our marriage was failing. So I'm sure a lot of you out there are probably sitting here thinking of your own episodes of how this has happened in your relationship as well. But it seems like when you're first dating, you're super careful about things. But then later, once you're married, it seems like a lot of that kind of goes away to an extent. In your mind, you don't think you're being unsafe or whatever, but in all reality, you're a lot more loose with how you are. So there's 12 phases of romantic love, and this is something that's been kind of proven over time as marriage counselors have met with people and dealt with people in their relationships. And so when you very first start dating, you have awareness. Then you have interest. Then you have positive exchange because you're starting to show an interest in each other and you want to date and whatever. That turns into a romantic interest. Then you have high emotional focus. After that, there's a positive romantic exchange. Then you have strong feelings of love and passion. So this would be during the times of you first being married and that kind of thing. And then you'll start creating those deepening relational bonds. And then after some time of being married, it seems to go to normalcy, which means you kind of get into routine or you have a lack of novelty. Then it ends up in reality. That's where you start having conflicts, you start having difficulties, you start having fatigue in your marriage, illness may be coming up, life starts happening at that point. And then if you're not careful, it can get to distraction and disinterest, which can then, at the very end of it, when all of that happens, can cause loss of romance. Mm-hmm. So if you notice in that list that number 5 is high emotional focus. This is the empathy that is always present when romantic love is kindled. Also notice the escalating passions that occur after high emotional focus exist. It remains there until normalcy and reality cause us to lose our empathy, and romance inevitably fades. Sizzling romantic love within your marriage is entirely possible and essential, but it requires ongoing heartfelt commitment. Empathy serves as the conduit through which the heart connects, ensuring that our actions positively influence our spouses. So as previously mentioned, romance is a fundamental daily requirement for both men and women and serves as the cornerstone for a strong and thriving marriage. It is neither complicated nor challenging. By actively fulfilling the needs and desires of our spouses in a language that resonates with them, in a manner that shows empathy and prioritization, our love and passion will endure. This approach will lead to flourishing marriages, characterized by mutual fulfillment and love, in alignment with the intentions of God from the beginning.
Yeah, so good.
So I think that's going to wrap up this week's episode for being, the law of romance, which is part of the law of priority. And romance is under the law of priority for a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a priority to keep that romance. If you cannot keep that romance alive, Michelle and I can look back in our relationship and we can see when that romance burned out.
Yeah.
And we had to relight that flame again, which was not easy.
No.
Next week, we're going to be talking about putting work into your relationship. We had to work at it to get that back. And we could have avoided all of that if we would have just noticed those signs when that was starting to fail and tried to fix those at that point.
Yep.
But we didn't do it. So is there anything that you'd like to add to this as we close this week?
No.
On romance, I think that just the key to this is just keep those little gestures alive. Hold hands. Give compliments where they're deserved. Or even if just out of the blue. It may not be something that they're expecting. Just compliment them for something,
Or buy your wife a puppy.
Puppy. We'll bypass that one. It has its limits. Buy your wife a puppy.
And he did do that.
I did.
Mr. Wilford is a very unique puppy.
Yeah.
And
I tried to sell him about 1,000 times now since I bought him for her. So sometimes, those things are regrets. That's what that comes around to.
But no, the small things are very, very important in a marriage. And I think it's very dearing to the heart from each spouse when you do those.
Yeah. And if you keep that romance alive, it's going to be hard for your marriage to fail. Yeah. It really is. I mean, it just comes down to that. So we're going to go ahead and call it good for this week. As we said, that ends the law of priority. And next week, we're going to be starting into the law of pursuit. Ooh. And we're going to take off on that one. That's going to be an interesting section as well. Hope you guys have been enjoying this study. Please subscribe and share to the podcast each week. Share this to people that could benefit from this. Everybody that has a marriage has been through things. And even if you don't feel like you're going through this stuff right now and this series may not be for you, it's still just a good recap, a good reminder, of how important it is to keep some of this stuff where it needs to be. And, you can never, I think, study too much about marriage to keep it stronger. I think regardless if you're having issues in some of these spots or not, it's always just a good refresher to make sure you don't get to that point.
And we know everybody's marriage is different.
Right.
We know every personality is different.
Yep.
We know that it's not for everybody, but, it's very important to love your spouse and to learn as much as you can to help that marriage.
Yeah. So with that being said, that's the end of this week's episode. And I'm Daniel Moore, and this is Michelle, my wife, that's been sitting here with me this week as we went through another section of our study on the 4 laws of love. I want to thank you guys for listening. This show really wouldn't be possible without you. If you're a fan of the show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us on your favorite platform. The links for most of those are in most of the show notes on the different platforms. That's all for this week, and we believe that God's Word never fails us. God's Word has stood the test of time, and through Jesus' death on the cross, He has connected the gap.
You've been listening to Connecting the Gap podcast. In this world, there are many disconnects that cause chaos in our lives. This podcast is birthed from the desire to share hope and restoration of the power of the gospel by being transparent and open in our biblical walk with God. Each week, we take a few moments as we navigate God's Word and peer into other people's testimonies and encourage each other to connect the gap. We upload a new audio podcast every Thursday and a video version of it on YouTube and Rumble. We are also on the Christian podcasting app, Edify. You can subscribe to our podcast on many of the available podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and more. We are also available on your Alexa-enabled devices. If you would like to contact our ministry for any reason, visit our contact page and send us a message. We hope you are blessed by this ministry. This is a production of Connecting the Gap Ministries.